Big week for gold, for silver, CPI numbers coming out. That will move the dollar, that will move the bond market, and that obviously will move the precious metals. But there's also another commodity that nobody's paying attention to except we here on the channel that is set for a decisive move. Let's get right into it. And as a bonus, 4 takeaways from the Rule Symposium that finished up in Florida. Let's go. Welcome to Hot Trades of the Day, your show for swing trading ideas for the coming days, weeks, and month. Well, happy Monday. I wish all of you a great start to the new week. My name is Daniel Wilhelmi. I'm here in the Bahamas. If you say Baha, what? Yeah, that's right. Bahamas, after working really hard last week at the Rule Symposium and then in the weeks before. Hey, we call it bull market lifestyle, right? We do the bull market part, but we also got to do the lifestyle, the living life and enjoying life part, right? That's why we do this whole stock thing and this whole commodity thing and this whole capital market thing. Otherwise, it makes no sense. So, here's the gold chart. Nothing to see here. You know the drill. CPI is going to come out. We know what the important levels are. It's 4,070 to 75. It's 4K on the downside, and then it's the downtrend. That'll be a biggie. But really, it's 4,215. You know, that's what's going to happen. And that's the real big move is going to come after the CPI. So let's talk about a commodity that really nobody's talking about. It was one of the really interesting takeaways from the Rule Symposium. And there you see we intertwine everything, that energy is completely out. Even at a conference that is focused on commodities, energy was not a topic. There were 3 uranium companies there. 2 of them were really under one umbrella. So in reality, it was only 2 different uranium companies. And there was one gas company there, nat gas. That one was interesting. Good story. That's something to keep an eye on. If you saw if you were there, if you saw the presentation, I think that's one that we should keep an eye on. That could be definitely worth a swing trade for sure. But anyway, that's nothing compared to, I don't know, 30, 40 precious metals companies, numerous copper companies. We are talking about oil, obviously. And if you saw last week's video about oil, you were way ahead of the market. If you missed it, hit the subscribe button. Here's the WTI chart. And look at this. In Asian trading, we are trying to break the downtrend in oil. The downtrend that has been in place since May 20th. So for about a solid almost 2 months, 8 weeks, we're trying to break it now. It'll be complete if we jump over the 200-day moving average. And if that happens, well, then things could turn really quickly for the oil price. I pointed out in last week's video on oil, we were really good and early on this one. The positive divergence, you can see the RSI down at the bottom, the green line, and then the declining oil price in the chart, right? So this is interesting. And again, if you jumped on the oil stocks that we talked about in last week's video, I think you're up about 5% already. Basically doing nothing and having a good time and enjoying your life. Nobody is invested in oil and in energy. That was one of my main takeaways. It was one of the most unexpected things that I didn't see coming at the Rule Symposium. By the way, I got to do something about this light. It looks I'm like back in the Berlin sex dungeon. I don't think you guys believe me that I'm in the Bahamas really, but I really am. Um, how do I get a good transition from a Berlin sex dungeon to the oil price? I consider myself pretty smart, but I can't figure that one out. I am sorry. So I met about, I want to say 20 of you. It was incredible. I didn't see that coming. I tried to give everybody as much time as possible. I hope it was okay for everybody. It was basically the time that I had budgeted to recharge a little bit, but that was completely fine. But so the first thing I learned is what a great group of people we have here at Bull Markets Lifestyle. Incredible. I was so impressed and amazed, not only about the knowledge, but also about the positivity and just genuinely good people and people you like to be around. So nice in today's social media world where everything is negative and you flame everybody and it's all about complaining. Seems like we're building something completely different here. That made me super happy. But what was really interesting is, obviously I got a lot of questions, and rightfully so. That's what I'm there for. Nobody asked me about energy. Interesting, right? This is the tip of the top of the commodity investors, right? They're not only at the Rule Symposium, they're also watching this channel. They're watching probably numerous other channels, rightfully so. There's some really great channels out there. You should definitely check them out. A lot of you subscribe to other newsletters. You're deep in the commodity space and in the commodity supercycle. Zero questions about energy, about oil, a little bit about uranium, but nothing about oil and nat gas. And that should tell us something. And that's what we talked about last week. When sentiment is so down, and not only the sentiment of the tourists, as you know, I call the general retail investor that jumps on every train that's hot, but always too late, obviously, and just dabbles into the mining stock when gold's going to be, well, next time they're going to come in, it's probably going to be when gold's going to be 5,000 and higher, probably 6,000. I call those the tourists, right? We live in commodity supercycle island. They just come in. And let me tell you, if you go to the Bahamas, you know all about tourists. Oh boy, a lot of them here. But even the people that are deeply interested in the commodity sector, nobody has oil on the radar. And when that is the case, man, that's a great contrarian indicator. And I think we got this one right last week. Now we need to see if the follow-through comes. As you can see in the WTI chart, we are trying to break the downtrend. That's the first signal. The big signal, obviously, is breaking the 200. We jump over the 200-day moving average. The party's going to start because there are going to be some short sellers. They're going to get flamethrower to the face. And I gave you the price action, the price point that we need to pay attention to. It's around 75.50. Here it is. You see it right here. So above the 200, we close above that. Now, important, we're not going to the moon. Unless something crazy happens in the Strait of Hormuz, we're definitely not going back to 100. Why? Midterm elections are coming up. Trump will do anything he can to keep the oil price down, keep gasoline prices down, at least till the midterm. But what could we see? Well, definitely gap fill right here around 85. And then we have the 50-day moving down. We have this support zone, now resistance. So we got triple doing potential. But this is a nice 12% gain. So in some of the oil stocks, you're probably going to make even higher gains. Now, again, a lot will have to do with CPI and the overall market, but keep an eye on the oil price. We jump about the 200, things can change really quickly for oil. Now, this leads me to the second topic of today's video, which are, I'm going to give you 4 takeaways, and I already gave you one. Energy is completely out. Nobody's talking about energy. A little bit about uranium still, which that made me happy, smart people. But nobody's talking about oil and nat gas. Why do I only give you 4? Are there only 4 takeaways from the symposium? Absolutely not. Of course not. I could give you 20. It is a great event. However, you know the wisdom, or maybe it's not wisdom, but you know the saying from self-help books, right? If you buy a self-help book and you just get one good idea that you implement in your life, it was worth the money and it was worth the time. Doesn't matter if the other 249 pages of the 250 pages didn't do anything for you. You got that one good idea that you're going to implement, that's going to help you improve. It was worth it. And it's kind of the same for these type of conferences, at least for me, which, to be fair, I probably know more commodity mining companies than most people, and I know more about the fundamentals. So a lot of the presentations, for example, weren't that interesting for me. But for other people, I'm sure they gave a lot of value. But I want to focus again on 3 more takeaways, just so you don't forget about them, because those are important. We got one that's we can apply to the market realistically right away, which is energy is completely out. Second one is, and if you follow this channel for a while, then you've heard me say this numerous times with a little bit of different data, but it doesn't really matter. Rick had a really good quote, and I want to give this to you, where Rick Rule said, "You lose money with about 85% of the mining stocks. The money is made in the other 15%." And while we can argue about the percentages, as you know, the numbers that I'm familiar with from the last supercycle were even higher than 85, maybe 90%, but will probably be a little lower this time around because the commodity price is going to go up a lot more. So that will probably cover up for a lot of bad management mistakes. But still, the message is very clear. The majority of the mining stocks, and with the majority, I mean, just like Rick, 3 out of 4 easily, maybe we're talking 4 out of 5 companies, best case scenario, they get taken over by a bigger player. More likely scenario, you're going to lose all your money and your left sock. So focus on the 15% or 10% or 20% of the companies that have managements, that have proven track records, that have done it before, that have great projects, that going to produce in this super cycle. That's important. That is one that not enough people talk about, that was not talked about in the Rule Symposium, and I was really hoping someone would bring it up of the speakers. Nobody was bringing it up. The super cycle is not going to run forever. There's going to be a time where we all going to cash out and take our gains, and they're going to be substantial long term, and walk away. Because if we don't do this, all the great gains that we had going up, we're going to lose them all going back down. And you know what I mean, because we saw this exact thing in the gold and silver miners Q4 2025 and then Q1 and 2 2026. Monster gains until the end of January 26, and now a lot of them are gone. Now this is going to happen at the end of the super cycle on a much, much larger scale. So we cannot forget that we need to take profits at some point. But here's the thing, if we know that the commodity supercycle is going to come to an end and it's not going to go forever, then we also have to take into account, hey, do these companies actually going to profit directly from the higher commodity prices through production? This is what I hear all the time with these small cap, micro cap mining companies that tell you, we have this incredible project, blah, blah, blah. Well, when are you guys going to be in production? Well, 32, 35. You know, if they tell you 32, it's really 35 to 38. So they are 10 years out, which makes sense if you're a grassroots project. So you're basically telling me that your mine is not going to profit at all from the super cycle because you're too late. Right? That's why. And I had a really good talk with one of the subscribers who said, man, I own way too many mining stocks. I gonna sell them off and I'm gonna focus on only on miners that are production, near production, development. And I was thinking, yes, he gets it. That's exactly right. I'm also okay with exploration companies if they're quality, if the projects are great, if the managements are great, because those probably gonna get taken out and taken over at a nice premium during this super cycle. But make no mistake about it, if you're a big fan of the junior producers that are drilling a couple of holes and then looking at some rocks, they're not going to be in production during the super cycle. They might profit from the hype, but those companies that only profit from the hype and don't really have anything to show for in the business model, in revenues, in earnings, they'll be the first ones that are going to get slaughtered once the super cycle reaches its peak, or probably even before that. So remember this. It's a really good quote by Rick Rule, who knows a lot more about commodities than I do. You'll lose money with 85% of the mining stocks. The money's made in the other 15%. Great takeaway. Second takeaway, we already talked about, energy's out. Third takeaway, volatility in mining stocks is unavoidable. If you hate volatility, if you can't stand book losses of 30%, 40%, either go really conservative with the mining stocks, or maybe an ETF, or something like royalty companies, or maybe the mining stocks are not for you. Just play the metals. Because volatility is the other side of the medal for the multi-bagger return potential that we have. You pay a price for everything in the market. The capital markets, nothing is free, especially on Wall Street. If you get mugged like on Wall Street, on front of the New York Stock Exchange, and they steal all your money, and they steal your pants, and they steal your nice jacket, I tell you, the banker's going to come out and they're just going to steal your socks too and walk right back in and let you leave bleeding on the street. That's how it works. There's a price for everything. And the price for the upside in the mining stocks, the long-term upside, which is incredible, we all experienced it in Q4 2025 and January, is volatility. Someone much smarter than me once said, and I really apologize that I can't give credit for this. When you buy a mining stock, you need to be prepared that it's down 20, 30% the next day, because that can actually happen. If some accident at a mine happens, if some bad drill results happened, whatever. And there was a really, really good panel at the Rule Symposium that focused on this. And I hope everybody saw it. If you didn't get a chance to see it, go back and watch it. It's really good. It's just part of the game. It sucks, I know. We just went through a 5-month period of herd, but that is what we need to endure in order to make the big profits in the end. And then the last one, that's a more personal one, but it might be interesting for you. For me, seeing companies and talking to managements, that is the number one reason why I go to these conferences. Talking to other bankers, not that interesting for me because they're usually rather conservative and they just focus on the seniors and maybe some bigger juniors or royalty companies. Super interesting for me were the talks that I had with you guys, the subscribers that were there. That was really interesting. And I remember, I didn't forget, Craig, I remember you and I, we're getting a drink next year at the latest. Maybe we'll see us before. I also remember, Anthony, we're going to hang out at the pool one afternoon. Didn't forget. Now that I say that out loud, that sounds way weirder than I meant it to sound, but I got it. So, and Martin, thank you for being so kind to give me the Uber ride. Who knows if I got back to the hotel otherwise, or I had to sleep in my suit on the beach. So, for me, those talks, I didn't expect that. That was super interesting and super valuable, and I got a lot out of it. And man, we got some really, really smart people in our community here. Wow. And I cannot wait to set up some meet and greets where we can all get together and talk in the future, because that'll be really valuable for all of you guys to just connect with others. I was connecting subscribers from the channel left and right. I felt like a real life Tinder, right? Like I should open up like a German dating service. I'm gonna call it Schnitzel Love, and that was incredible. But really for me, the main part is seeing new companies, talking to management. And a lot of my favorites, some of them you know, because I've mentioned them on the channel here, so I can do that. Some of them you don't know. I gave some of them out for the people that were there. There was a little bit of free value for them. That's obviously great for me, right? It shows Rick believes in these companies as well, as he sees the same thesis that I do. That's great to know. But I talked to around like 15, so I saw and talked to managements of around like 50 new companies. That's a lot, but it's a long conference. And usually I always say, if I see about 8 companies, then I have 1 or maybe 2 that I find interesting. Here I saw 15, and those were vetted before by Rick Rule. So there were no microcaps there, no junior producers, at least that I know. Actually, you know what? One of the uranium companies might be. But so there were maybe a few, but not many, and definitely not the microcap, just the 85% of what we talked about earlier, basically. But still, I saw and talked to 15 companies, and I only liked 2 of them. And there was one that I like that could be a really good swing trading opportunity in the gold sector, but I don't think they'll ever go into production. The rest, not for me. Doesn't mean they're bad companies, they're just not for me. And what I really walked away with was, the best companies there that I saw overall were actually the companies that I was already invested in. And that is a realization that can also be really valuable, because that shows you, okay, your thesis is correct, and maybe you want to double down on these positions, expand those positions. So those were my 4 takeaways. You know some of the companies. I can give you 3. Aya was the big star. I've been talking about Aya since I went to the mining forum Zurich in 2025. They were the big star. They were the big talk of the town. America's gold and silver, and Contango silver and gold. Man, can somebody please just make, like, there are laws for everything. Come on, give me a law that says it's going to be gold and silver or the other way around, but it's going to be one of the two. So those were 3 that I personally own. Doesn't mean that you should own them. I'm not your financial advisor. That were present, that I'm invested in, that I really like. Obviously, there were royalty companies there that are excellent, but man, I would like to get them a little cheaper if for me to catch my interest. And then the other ones, we'll keep those private for now. That is it. Have a great start to the new week. All the best from the Bahamas. We'll see us tomorrow. Bye-bye.